When you cross the Midwest by car, you'll spend hours driving through what's known as the Corn Belt. Heading east, this region stretches from Nebraska to the western edge of Pennsylvania. From north to south, it covers Minnesota down to Missouri. As much as 40 to 50% of this corn goes into our gas tanks in the form of ethanol. According to the Environmental and Energy Study Institute, the addition of this biofuel reduces greenhouse gas emissions from internal combustion engines by 19 to 48% compared to gasoline without ethanol. But as more manufacturers shift to electric vehicles, what's the outlook for the ethanol industry long term?
That foreshadows some considerable disruption for farmers in the Corn Belt. Not many industries that I know of can handle a 40% drop in demand. And that's what we may be looking at once electric cars take over.
That's Robert Turner, an organic farmer in western North Carolina and author of Lewis Mumford and the Food Fighters, A Food Revolution in America. Turner says that demand waxes and wanes in agriculture. He points to the mid-1990s when consumers either quit smoking or took up e-cigarettes, and the demand for burley tobacco dropped. In response, farmers transitioned from growing tobacco to a variety of vegetables. However, when it comes to growing corn for ethanol, there's no intention of slowing down anytime soon. A spokesperson for the National Corn Growers Association, representing the interests of more than 300,000 corn farmers across the Midwest, says there's still a global market for ethanol. For instance, in Brazil, cars run on 100% ethanol. The Biden administration also recently approved an increase in current ethanol levels in gasoline from 10 to 15% to help offset price increases at the fuel pump. That's because ethanol is much cheaper than petroleum-based fuel. Others in the industry believe flex fuel vehicles have a bright future. These are specially tooled cars that can operate on gasoline containing up to 85% ethanol.
I'm driving a hybrid that is also flex fuel. And it's mainly because, number one, it's got a low carbon intensity score. Right now, my vehicle is as low as and probably lower than most plug-in electrics when you're talking about life cycle greenhouse gases.
That's Ron Lamberty, Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for the American Coalition for Ethanol. He's currently driving a test flex fuel car.
It's a 2019 Ford Fusion Hybrid, but I converted it, got it. I didn't buy a kit. I guess they gave it to me because they wanted to see how it worked, but I got a kit on it that allows me to put E85 in it and drive it around. So we're trying to demonstrate that it can be done and that it's not expensive and it's a great option. Not obviously, but I bought my car used for, I think, $19,000 and the kit cost about $700. As you compare that to most of the high-end vehicles that are electric right now, and it's a much more affordable option.
But while ethanol drastically reduces greenhouse gas emissions from our engines, the whole process of growing the corn and converting it into ethanol does result in vast amounts of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere. Some experts estimate the cost to be as much as 150,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide per ethanol manufacturing plant per year.
Currently, at these ethanol plants, the CO2 is emitted directly from the plant in the fermentation process and just released into the atmosphere. And it's released right above the plant and quickly disperses into the atmosphere.
That's Chris Hill, Director of Environmental and Permitting for Summit Carbon Solutions, a company focused on capture and storage solutions for greenhouse gas emissions coming from ethanol production.
There's three main components of it. So the first is capturing CO2 from ethanol plants across 5 states. So Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. So that's the first part. The second part is a pipeline system to connect all those ethanol plants and transport the CO2 up to North Dakota. And the third part is in North Dakota, just west of Bismarck in Oliver Mercer County. We're going to be installing some injection wells to inject the CO2 and safely and permanently store that CO2 underground.
According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, there are 198 ethanol production facilities in the country. Summit Carbon Solutions has a partnership with 32 of them and hopes to bring these factories to net zero emissions by 2030. Hill says the technology for injecting greenhouse gases into the ground is not new. In fact, the Environmental Protection Agency's injection control program has been in effect since the 1960s.
We have been safely injecting fluids into the ground for some time now. And so what this project does is put those proven technologies and safe technologies together for this purpose, which ultimately helps the agriculture industry, helps the ethanol industry, helps the communities that they're within, and has a significant environmental benefit.
Summit Carbon Solutions has committed $4.5 million to this project, which is expected to be fully operational by 2024. Efforts like these will be vital to keep this industry flourishing as environmental issues continue to become front and center for many Americans. The ethanol industry alone supports 360,000 jobs in the U.S. and is a major reason that corn remains America's largest crop, with more than 90 million acres of land planted to corn each year. You can find out more about this topic by visiting the U.S. Department of Agriculture website at nal.usa.gov. You can learn more about all of our past guests by visiting our website at viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Polly Hansen. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. Our studio engineer is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson. Coming up next week.
And I hope that now that Americans have gotten more used to wearing masks, that we will also consider wearing these during periods of high rates of flus and colds.
The benefits of face coverings past COVID. Then,
according to some studies, the McDonald's arches are more recognizable worldwide than the Christian cross.
The global appeal of the fast food chains we frequent and love. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.